parts are, as I said, there are 6 of them, and there's 4 women's stories, and they're all living women told that I had worked with and interviewed over a long period of time, and they opened their hearts and lives to me to share their life stories. And these 6 portions are called the harvesters, the travelers, the creators, the history keepers, the teachers, and the protectors. So the next piece is, I say, it's what I call the urban fairy tale, or furry tale for that matter. And it is, I guess, another kind of creation. It's about how love is created and how community and home is created. And it's called The Honeymakers. Once upon a time, not so long ago and not so far away, there lived a princess, a very clever, beautiful, and oh so talented princess, who lived in a magical kingdom by the sea. It was a wondrous place indeed, with its countless castles and towering towers, its glitters and glamours and beautiful boomers. Truly it was the grooviest place in all the world. So thought all the other royal ones, known as the Lotus Eaters. And the most proud and attitudinal of them all was the clever, beautiful, and oh so talented princess, known as Lola Lalula. Beyond the kingdom walls of sturdy attitudes and stout condescensions, beyond the roiling river and the mighty mountains, lived the peasants, known as the honeymakers. The Lotus Eaters fancied that all the peasants envied them and dreamt of being Lotus Eaters too. Every year the walls grew higher and thicker, the river wider, and the mountains more ominous, all this to protect the royals from the rabble. The only time the honeymakers were let enter across the great drawbridges known as the Port of Man, Arthur's Lang, and Patchouli, was to bring their wares to the great markets of the kingdom. Some wandered in awestruck amazement and murmured, "If only I could live in this wondrous place, in a castle of my own instead of my humble hive. But I would have to sell my soul or my firstborn child for a down payment. Oh, alas." Still, many more of them loved their humble hives and honey-making, and happily returned east to their queendom, hurrying to cross the great drawbridges and roiling river in time to beat rush hour, while the Lotus Eaters' jeers fell on mostly deaf ears. All the Lotus Eaters believed themselves above the honeymakers, every last prince and princess of them. They believed that just being there made them so, and never thought to calculate their heart-ego ratio or their temperamenture. For they were too busy keeping their plates spinning, spinning, spinning on sticks. They would spin and spin till they were hypnotized, for they believed that to be the true path to enlightenment. But soon the bats of boredom would prick them and bite them, until leaping high they shrieked, "More sticks, more plates, and faster, faster must they spin." And when there were no more to be had, they snuck or sneaked them away from each other. All's fair in love and plates, they'd snicker. And Princess Lola was the most brilliant spinner of them all, with sticks longer and plates wider, and spins so great that even gravity was stunned. Through forests of quivering sticks she danced and whirled, till she spun as fast as her plates, and nothing and no one could stick to her. As the years spun by, she learned the difference between boredom and loneliness, and wished for someone to stick to her. What she did know is that if she wished and spun and wished hard enough, it would set up a hum that only her one true love, her prince, could hear. But what she didn't know was that it was being heard far, too far away. Through the jingle and jangle, under the glitter and gush, across the roiling river and over the great drawbridge, her hum had traveled straight to the heart of his ears and the ears of his heart, where the hum became a song and the song a symphony. Princess Lola had hummed herself up a honeymaker, known as Mr. Wonderful. And when they finally met in a place between their worlds, by a crescent bay on a sunny day, they knew they would become greater than the sum of their parts, and what marvelous parts they were. Vowing never to be unstuck, the fateful decision was made. The princess would bid farewell to her toots and towers, her glams and glitters. She would cross the roiling Fraser River on the Port of Man and become a honeymaker. Oh, how the Lotus Seekers lamented. Oh, how they sighed and cried and cried and sighed. Oh, our lovely Lola. is leaving us to live amongst the honeymakers, never to glitter and spin again, never to eat really good sushi or catch a Broadway musical. Oh, fiddle-dee-dee, Lola trilled, enchanted by clean air and pheromones. I can spin my plates anywhere. And clutching her accoutrement, she sped to the velcroed embrace of Mr. Wonderful. But after a year and a month and a week and a day, she opened her eyes wider than wide and awoke to the big empty space inside her, where her spinning once lived. Oh, where are my bladders and glams, my toots and towers? Where, oh, where are my lovely lotus eaters? For the Lotai had been right in their lamenting. The princess and her spinning were gone forever. The harder she tried to stay the same, the more her sticks bent and her plates broke, and none of the honeymakers cared she'd been the best spinner in all the world. And she sighed, and she cried, and she cried, and she sighed, as she learned the difference between loneliness and unfulfillment. She learned that spinning doesn't make you truly royal, not even a little bit. Though she languished amidst her pointless plates and sticks, she gradually heard a faint humming coming from all around her. It was not a hum of spinning plates, but the hive hum of honey making. It grew louder and drew her up and away from her broken bits, drew her out the door where the sweet smell of pollen and purpose filled the air. Lola began to hunger for honey of her own, longed to learn the deep magic inside each honeymaker, magic that transforms pollen and purpose into honey to nourish all the land. And she learned that all the honeymakers were too busy buzzing about creating happy hives and luscious lives, too busy creating their own nectar from deep within themselves, that they didn't care a stick about spinning and left all that to the lotus eaters. And she learned that they didn't give a plate for being a princess, for they were all queen bees in their own hives and in their own lives. They were too busy making pollen palaces where everyone could draw in the goodness to make their own honey magic, palaces for singing and dancing, for painting and prancing, for writing and reading and the dreaming of dreams. They didn't give a spin for toots and towers and glams and glitters. They were too busy making a life sweeter for everyone. For this is what the honeymakers believed was the true path to enlightenment. And little by little, the hive of Lola and Mr. Wonderful was filled with the sweet scent of pollen and purpose and the amorous aroma of their own special honey. And whenever they joined the other honeymakers in crossing the great drawbridges and the roiling river for the market days of the magic kingdom, the lotus eaters looked in vain for the Princess Lola and saw only another peasant, all of them but one, who was herself having a secret fling with a honeymaker at the time. Only she could see that Princess Lola had become a queen bee and a honeymaker extraordinaire.
Thanks, everybody.